So there's a part of what just happened in Iran that the headlines buried, and I want to walk you through it. Because once you see the pattern underneath their new leader's message, you realize this isn't just grief. It's a plan. Before I go any further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from today. I'm curious who's tuning in for this one. I actually read them. Something happened in Tehran overnight that the news cycle is already moving past. And if you blink, you're going to miss the part that actually matters. Iran's new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, issued his first official statement since his father's funeral. And on the surface, it reads like what you'd expect: grief, anger, a vow of revenge. Standard stuff for a region that's been on fire for months, right? But I spent the morning reading the whole thing, the full text, not just the clip they put on the ticker. And I gotta tell you, something about it landed differently. Because buried inside that statement, in the structure of it, in the specific promises he made and the specific threats he left hanging, there's a signal, a real one, about what comes next. And almost every network I checked this morning missed it. Let me back up for a second. For those of you just tuning in, here's the situation we're actually in. On February 28th, joint U.S. and Israeli airstrikes hit Tehran. Targeted strikes, high level. And among the dead was Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran for over 3 decades. The man who had run the country since 1989. His funeral was a massive, days-long affair. Thousands upon thousands of mourners in the streets. And then, after a swift succession process, his son Mojtaba was named the new supreme leader by the Assembly of Experts. Now, here's the thing about Mojtaba that you need to understand, because this is where the situation starts to get really interesting. He's not a politician. He's never held formal office. He was always the behind-the-scenes guy, the gatekeeper for his father, the one who managed the factions, who kept the Revolutionary Guard happy, who made sure nobody stepped out of line. He was also, by the way, already under U.S. sanctions since 2019. So the guy who just became the most powerful man in Iran was already on America's list. Think about that for a second. The U.S. had already designated him as a threat before he ever held the title. And his father was killed in a strike that the U.S. and Israel carried out together. So now the new leader is a guy who was already considered an enemy by the same people who just killed his father. And his first official act as supreme leader is to write a statement that says, and I'm quoting here, "We pledge to avenge the blood of the martyred leader and all the martyrs of these 2 wars from the criminal and disgraced killers." That's not diplomatic language. That's not posturing. That's a declaration. But here's where I started to realize this whole thing runs deeper than just grief. Because if you actually read the full statement, not the summary, the structure is really specific. He didn't just vent. He laid out a comprehensive national strategy, broken into parts. 7 parts, to be exact. And in those parts, he addressed the armed forces, he addressed the people, he addressed neighboring countries, he addressed the families of the dead. He even addressed his father directly, as if he was still in the room. This was not a man lost in emotion. This was a man drawing up a blueprint. Let's talk about what he actually said about revenge, because this is the part that makes me the most uneasy. He said, and I quote, "We assure everyone that we shall not forego the avenging of the blood of your martyrs." And then he clarified something important. He said the revenge isn't just for his father. It's for every single Iranian killed in the conflict, every civilian, every soldier, every child. He specifically mentioned a school, the Shajara Tayyiba School in Manab, said the deliberate crime against that school will get particular attention in the revenge process. Now ask yourself, why would he name a specific school? Why would he single that out? Because he's signaling something. He's telling his own people and he's telling the world that this isn't abstract. This isn't some vague, we will retaliate boilerplate. He's building a case file, a ledger of debts, and he's telling everyone who's on the hook. That is a very, very different kind of threat than what we usually hear from Iranian leaders. Usually it's grand rhetoric about Zionism and imperialism. This was itemized, specific, cold. And then he got to the military part. And this is where I had to stop and reread it. He said, and I'm quoting, "The leverage of closing the Strait of Hormuz must definitely continue to be utilized." Now, for those of you who don't follow this stuff closely, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. A huge percentage of global oil passes through there. If Iran closes it or makes it too dangerous to navigate, oil prices spike. Global markets panic. Every economy on earth feels it. And he's not just saying they're thinking about it, he's saying it's a must. Continuing to use that leverage is a requirement, a condition of their survival. He's basically telling the world, we have a nuclear option on the global economy, and we're not putting it down. But wait, it gets worse. He said, studies have been conducted regarding opening other fronts where the enemy has minimal experience and where it would be highly vulnerable. Should the war continue, activation of such fronts will be carried out based on certain interests. Read that again. Opening other fronts where the enemy has minimal experience. He's not talking about conventional warfare. He's not talking about missile exchanges. He's talking about taking the fight somewhere unexpected, somewhere the United States and Israel aren't prepared for. We don't know where, we don't know what, but the fact that he explicitly said that means they've already planned it. This isn't a threat, it's a playbook. And he just told us he's ready to run a few new plays. Now, I want to pause here and talk about the larger context, because this didn't happen in a vacuum. The strikes that killed his father came after months of failed negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. Back in February, there were talks in Geneva. They were supposed to limit Iran's nuclear program, get inspectors in, ease sanctions. But they fell apart. President Trump, who was in office at the time, had given a 10 to 15-day deadline for progress. And when it didn't happen, the military option went from a threat to a reality. Analysts at the time said the U.S. and Israel had basically lost hope in diplomacy. One expert called the negotiations completely a smokescreen, said the military buildup in the region was so massive it was obvious they were planning something. So by the time the bombs fell on February 28th, nobody should have been surprised. But here's the thing nobody expected. The strike actually killed the supreme leader. Think about that. You plan a limited strike to send a message, to degrade nuclear capabilities, to force a negotiating shift, and instead you take out the head of state, the man who had been the face of the country for more than 30 years. That is not a controlled outcome. That is a whole new level of escalation. And now his son is sitting in his chair, a man who has no formal political experience, but who has deep ties to the Revolutionary Guard, a man who watched his father die in a U.S.-Israeli strike, a man who was already sanctioned by the U.S. before he took power, a man who just said revenge is non-negotiable. Now let me tell you what the experts are saying about this guy, because I did the research. I wanted to know who we're actually dealing with here. One expert, a guy from Johns Hopkins, said Mojtaba is more ready than other candidates to quickly consolidate power and assert control over the system. That's code for he's not going to be a weak leader. He's not going to be a placeholder. He's going to grip the levers of power and hold on. Another analyst said Mojtaba is more hardline than his father, and that's saying something, because Ali Khamenei was not exactly a moderate. He was the guy who ran the country for 35 years. He was the guy who called America the Great Satan, and his son is to his right. Think about that for a second. The new leader of Iran is further to the hard line than the guy who was already one of the hardest line leaders on earth. And here's the part that really gets me. There's a quote from a Middle East expert named Vali Nasser. He said, "Nobody emerging now is going to be able to compromise. This is a hard-line choice made in a hard-line moment." That's the key word, compromise. He's saying this man cannot make a deal with the U.S. He cannot back down. The circumstances of his rise, the death of his father in a U.S.-Israeli strike, make it politically impossible for him to extend an olive branch, even if he wanted to, which he almost certainly doesn't. So where does that leave us? Let me paint the picture for you. Right now, the U.S. and Iran are effectively in a state of war. It's not declared. It's not boots on the ground. But there have been waves of strikes, missile attacks, retaliation. The Strait of Hormuz is a flashpoint. U.S. bases in the Gulf have been targeted. Iran has been attacking U.S. assets in the region. The U.S. has been striking back. And in the middle of all of it, the leader of Iran just publicly pledged to avenge every single Iranian killed in the conflict. From the supreme leader down to the children at the school in Manab. And he's saying the way they'll do that is they'll keep the Strait of Hormuz under threat. They'll open new fronts. They'll expand the war beyond the current battlefield. Now, let me ask you a question, a real one. And I want you to just sit with it for a second. What happens if the U.S. Navy tries to force the Strait of Hormuz open? What happens if a U.S. ship gets hit? What happens if oil prices spike and the global economy takes a hit? And suddenly, this isn't just a Middle Eastern conflict anymore. Because that's the thing about this new leader's message. He wasn't just talking to Iran. He wasn't just talking to the U.S. and Israel. He was talking to every country in the world that depends on that shipping lane. Every country that buys oil. Every country that has economic ties to the region. He was saying effectively, this is going to cost everyone, and we are ready to pay that cost. And that is a different level of threat. Now I want to talk about something that almost nobody is mentioning. And this is the part that I think is the real story underneath the headlines. Mojtaba Khamenei was not a political figure before this. He was a religious figure, a cleric, a behind-the-scenes operator. He had no elected office. He had no public profile. But he was groomed for this for years. His father positioned him as the protector of the system. He was the one who managed the Revolutionary Guard. He was the one who kept the hardline factions in line. He was effectively the unofficial vice leader for a long time. And now he's the leader. And he's already proven that he can speak with authority. He can command attention. He can deliver a message that is so comprehensive, so layered, so emotionally charged that it unifies his country behind him. Think about what he said to the Iranian people. He said, the effective presence of the people must be maintained in social spheres, political spheres, security spheres. He's calling on the nation to be part of the war effort, not just the military, everyone. That's how you build a resistant state. That's how you get a population to endure sanctions, isolation, war. You make them feel like they're in it together. You give them a leader who's grieving with them, who's lost family too, who's making promises to them personally. And then you look at what he said to neighboring countries. He told them to shut down U.S. bases. He warned them that those bases are targets. He said that Iran has no intention of attacking the countries themselves, but if U.S. bases are there, they will be hit. That is a direct challenge to every Gulf state that hosts U.S. troops. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE. They have to choose. Do they stay aligned with the U.S. and risk Iranian retaliation, or do they distance themselves, shut down the bases, and hope Iran leaves them alone? Now you can see why the networks buried this part, because it forces a question that nobody in Washington wants to answer right now. Is the U.S. military presence in the region becoming a liability? Let me say something that might sound harsh, but I think it's true. The death of Ali Khamenei did not weaken Iran. It might have hardened them. They now have a leader who has a personal stake in revenge. A leader who is aligned with the Revolutionary Guard, the hardliners, the religious establishment. A leader who is not afraid to threaten the global economy to get what he wants. And the U.S. and Israel, they're in a tough spot because they've already struck Iran. They've already killed the leader. The threat has been maximized. What more can they do? A ground invasion? That would be a disaster. More strikes? Those just deepen the resentment. Sanctions? They've already been sanctioned to the point of economic pain. There's no obvious off-ramp here. And that is the most dangerous part of all. So let me circle back to where we started. The headline was Iran's new leader vows revenge. And that's true. But it's also incomplete because it's not just revenge. It's a comprehensive plan. It's a threat to the Strait of Hormuz. It's a promise to open new fronts. It's a demand to neighboring countries to choose sides. It's a call for national unity behind a war effort. It is effectively a declaration of intent. And the intent is, this is not over. This is not going to simmer down. This is going to escalate. Now, I want to go back to something he said about revenge that I think is the most chilling part. He said, the revenge we have in mind is not just because of the martyrdom of the illustrious leader of the revolution. Every member of the nation martyred by the enemy is a separate case that demands we seek revenge. He's not just trying to avenge his father. He's trying to avenge everyone. Every single Iranian killed in the conflict. He's turned the entire nation's grief into a personal mission. And then he added, a limited portion of this revenge for the blood of our martyrs can already be seen. But until we completely take revenge, this file will remain on top of all the others. That means they're already in the process of revenge. Right now, the missile strikes, the drone attacks, the threats. That's just the beginning. He said the file will stay on top until it's completely done. This is not a one-time strike. This is a sustained campaign. And he has no intention of stopping. Let me tell you what I think happens next. Not a prediction, just an assessment of the path we're on. First, we're going to see more attacks on U.S. assets in the region. Iran has already proven they can hit U.S. bases. They have the missiles, they have the drones, they have the will, and now they have a leader who has explicitly ordered them to continue. Second, we're going to see the Strait of Hormuz become a flashpoint. Iran will increase harassment, they'll threaten ships, they'll make it dangerous, they'll force the US and the world to respond. And once they start responding, the risk of a direct confrontation goes through the roof. Third, we're going to see Iran try to open those, quote, other fronts he mentioned, where the enemy has minimal experience. That could be cyber, that could be asymmetric warfare, that could be proxies, that could be something we haven't even thought of. And through all of this, the global economy is going to be vulnerable. Oil prices are going to be volatile. Energy markets are going to be nervous. And governments around the world are going to have to choose. Do they side with the US? Do they try to stay neutral? Do they try to negotiate with Iran on their own? This whole thing is about to get very complicated, very fast. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. Mujtaba Khamenei was always a hardliner, but he was also a pragmatist in some ways. He managed the system. He kept factions together. He wasn't a hothead. But now, he's a hothead who lost his father. He's a pragmatist who has a personal vendetta. He's a system manager who just inherited a country at war. And he's made it very clear that he is not going to back down. There are no easy solutions here. Diplomacy is probably dead for now. The military options have not worked. The sanctions haven't worked. And the new leader is more motivated and more dangerous than his predecessor. So what's left? I honestly don't know. And I think that's the point. I think he wants us to feel that uncertainty. I think he wants the world to realize that Iran is not going to be bullied, that Iran is not going to capitulate, that Iran is willing to pay the price to avenge its dead. This isn't just a political crisis. It's not just a military conflict. This is personal on both sides. And when things get personal, they get unpredictable, unforgiving, and very, very hard to walk back. Now, I promised earlier I'd come back to that one detail almost every network missed. And here it is. The statement, the full text, the one we've been talking about, it was released on his Telegram account, not a press conference, not a formal address on state television, just a written message posted to Telegram. Now think about that. The most powerful man in Iran, the successor to 35 years of leadership, his first official message to the world, and he puts it on Telegram. Why does that matter? Because Telegram is unmediated. It's not vetted by the state media. It goes directly to millions of Iranians who use the app. It bypasses the filters. It speaks directly to the people. He is not interested in the diplomatic track. He is not interested in crafting a careful message for the international community. He is speaking directly to his own people. And he is telling them that he is one of them, that he grieves with them, that he is willing to fight for them. That's not a statesman. That's a wartime leader. And he just took the oath. So where does this leave us? Where does this leave the viewer at home watching this, trying to figure out what it means for them? I think the honest answer is we have entered a period of profound uncertainty, a period where the old rules might not apply, where the new leader of Iran is not interested in compromise, where the Strait of Hormuz is a ticking time bomb, where the U.S. and Israel have to decide if they're willing to escalate even further. And the thing is, there's no obvious right answer. Every option is risky. Every path leads to more danger. Every move could be the one that triggers a wider war. I don't want to leave you with a false sense of comfort. I don't want to say everything will be fine, because honestly, I don't think it will. Not in the short term. But I do think there's value in understanding what's actually happening, in seeing the layers beneath the headlines, in recognizing that the man at the top of Iran is not just grieving, he's planning, he's threatening, he's building a case for revenge that he intends to carry out. And he's told the world in language that cannot be misinterpreted that the file on this is not closed. It will remain open until the revenge is complete. That's the part that the headlines missed. The part that should make us all sit up a little straighter. The part that changes everything. This isn't over. It's just beginning. And the next chapter of this conflict is going to be written in a language that none of us are fully prepared to read. Let's just hope we all understand what's at stake before it's too late. Thanks for hanging with me on this one. I'll be tracking this as it develops, and I'll keep walking you through the parts the networks skim over. There's a lot more to come on this. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.